We'll see if it works. It might run out of memory. I don't know. I might have to unload a few things. Right, so let's slightly bigger brush. Choose that one. I'll just get a little bit more pale, kind of yellowy colours here. I just want a little bit more here. So that is more using the watercolour brushes actually, but then I'll go over to the slightly stiffer brushes and mix a dark, sort of mid-tone green. So I've got some green and some raw sienna, so it's not too strong a colour. So that makes quite a nice sort of green. These areas that are quite dense, I'll probably paint fairly solidly. And then at the edge of the canopy, I might just make a few kind of dots and dashes just to suggest individual leaves. I quite like these. I quite like a mixture of sort of watercolour, transparent watercolour, and the more opaque colours. Some people tend to paint gouache very opaquely, so it can look a little bit chalky if you do that. So my preference is something a little bit more in between the two. So that could be a mid-tone, and perhaps go a little bit darker in places. So it's sort of fairly random marks just to sort of suggest the foliage. If you've got individual tree trunks, go for a slightly smaller brush. So I will quite often paint what I can see in the distance first and then gradually work forward. Make a slightly darker, mix out brown and blue, thinner brush, individual branches. A bit like that. That's probably enough to suggest those. Some of these shadows coming across here, again, I can probably use a similar sort of mix, a little bit more raw sienna in. And just pop those shadows across. So far, I've not actually used any white, but I could introduce some white, a little bit of that. So it might be that there are some sort of pale leaves in the foreground. So I had a little bit of white and or little bits of sky poking through. Some blue in with that. So in that way, it's a bit more forgiving than watercolours. So with watercolours, once the paint's down, it's difficult to manipulate the paint too much. But with this, I could bring in a little bit of sky and things like that. Not too many. Yeah, and if areas went wrong, there's a chance to sort of wash out areas and then overpaint. So that's my sort of take on using watercolour in a gouache sort of style.
So are you using watercolours?
Yeah.
And are they pen or are they tubes?
They're tubes, yeah, tubes, yeah. I don't tend to use the pans because I find them a bit too, it's so difficult to get the paint out, or to get enough paint. And I think particularly with this way of working, I tend to need slightly more paint anyway, slightly thicker paint. You could paint it thicker still, so you could do sort of, fairly thick paint. Part of why I wanted to use this was really speed and working outdoors. I thought this might be a quicker, more sketchy way of working. Plus, it's a little bit lighter, just carrying paper on boards, and it'll dry quickly. So I haven't got to worry about bringing cases to transport wet oil paintings and things. So I was thinking, particularly for the things like the outdoor things, the holidays and outdoor painting, could be quite a good medium, and a good medium for very quick, sketchy work. Just working up ideas.
So would you buy actual gouache paint, or
I would
use
just use
watercolour?
what you've got. Yeah. The only one I buy is like a white gouache.
White gouache.
Because the white gouache tends to be more opaque than a white watercolour. But if you've got watercolours, just use what you've got. You can buy gouache, but they're fairly expensive for a reasonable one. Yeah, I would just use whatever you've got around, really. And the thing is, for me, I can't imagine I'm going to use it a lot. And I've got a lot of watercolours already, so I'd rather kind of use those. Even more paints. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right.